Steve Harvey-Style. Let me tell you something real quick. Some folks out here, they don't want love. They want a reaction. They want you crying, texting, checking, breaking down, blowing up their phone at 2 a.m. They want to know they still got you, not because they love you, but because they love the control. See, he wasn't expecting you to walk away. He was expecting you to stay stuck, waiting on him to grow up, to act right, to choose you. But you didn't beg. You didn't chase. You didn't even speak. You gave him the one thing he wasn't ready for, your silence. Now that's a message. That's not weakness. That's strength wrapped in wisdom. That's you saying, I could lose myself trying to hold on to you, but I love me too much to go out like that. Listen, there's a version of you that used to break down when people pulled away, but now you protect your peace like it's your paycheck. You don't chase no one who's running in circles. You don't explain your worth to somebody who wasn't even listening. And the truth is, when you stop talking, when you stop showing up, when you stop fighting battles that only you were fighting, that silence echoed louder than any, I love you. He pretended to say, see, God don't make no mistakes. He'll remove people from your life to make room for your healing. He'll close doors, not to punish you, but to protect you. So stop feeling bad for letting go. Stop feeling guilty for choosing you. Because one day, and it may not be today, but one day, he gonna sit there scrolling through them old messages, remembering the way you loved him. And all he gonna hear is the silence you left behind. And that, my friend, that's your peace, that's your power, and that's your proof that you healed without a show. You just walked away and glowed. There comes a moment in every person's journey when they stop playing the part they were cast in and start writing their own story. That's what you did. He wanted control. He wanted you consumed. He wanted your whole being wrapped around his presence. Every text, every like, every glance, he wanted to own your reactions, your emotions, your energy. But what he didn't count on was your awakening. He didn't expect that one day you'd simply go quiet, not because you were broken, but because you were done performing. You see, some people thrive on chaos, not because they're bold, but because they're empty. And to fill that void, they look for someone who will orbit around them, spinning, questioning, doubting, needing. To him, your obsession wasn't a problem. It was the prize. Every tear you shed, every argument you initiated, every paragraph you wrote trying to explain your worth. He took that as validation. Proof that he still had a hold on you, but you flipped the script. And baby, when you did, everything shifted. He was prepared for the screaming. He was prepared for the questions. He was prepared for the I miss you messages and the late night calls. That's how it always played out before, wasn't it? You begging for clarity, crying for closeness, crawling for crumbs. But not this time. This time you chose silence. Not because you didn't care. Oh, you cared deeply. But you cared about yourself more. See, silence is not weakness. It's not giving up. It's not avoidance. It is power refined. It's you saying, I no longer invest energy where it isn't respected. It's walking away with dignity, not storming off in drama. It's choosing peace over pride and clarity over chaos. And when that silence hit, he felt it. Not immediately, no. At first, he probably thought you were bluffing, playing a game, waiting for him to come running so you could finally flip the roles. But silence is different from absence. Silence means the door didn't just close, it locked. When you stopped reacting, you took the power back. Because let's be honest, reaction is currency. When you react, you're spending emotional energy. You're giving someone real estate in your heart and your mind. And he banked on that. He banked on the idea that no matter how much he pulled away, you'd come chasing. That no matter how toxic things got, you'd still try to fix it. That no matter how small he made you feel, you'd still beg to be seen. But not anymore. This time you didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't fight for a seat at a table you no longer wanted to sit at. You didn't need closure from someone who only offered confusion. You became your own closure. And that's where your true power came alive. Silence in its purest form is freedom. It's you breaking free from the cycle of proving, pleasing, and performing. It's you choosing self-respect over temporary validation. It's the ultimate declaration. I no longer need to be heard by someone who never really listened. Now, don't get it twisted. Silence isn't easy. It takes courage to walk away when every part of your heart wants to fix things. It takes strength to stay quiet when you've been silenced for so long. But that's the beauty of it. That's what makes it a revolution. Because you didn't just go silent. You reclaimed your narrative. He wanted you obsessed. He wanted to be the center of your storm. But you gave him silence. A silence so loud it echoes in the spaces where your presence used to be. A silence so powerful it forced him to sit with himself, without the noise of your love cushioning his ego. A silence that made it clear you are no longer available for emotional games and unfinished healing. So the next time someone mistakes your quiet for weakness, let them. The truth is, you've never been stronger. Because when you stopped pouring into him, you started pouring into yourself. When you stopped answering his call, you started listening to your own. And when you flipped the script, you didn't just change the story, you changed the author. It's no longer about what he wanted. Obsession is noise. It's frantic, chaotic, and heavy. It's that desperate need to be seen, to be answered, to be validated, even if the person on the other end is giving you nothing but confusion in return. It's the overthinking, the double texting, the watching when they're online, the emotional roller coaster that never really ends. Obsession doesn't feel like power. It feels like panic dressed up as passion. It screams, please notice me. Even when it's clear they already have, and they're choosing not to care. But silence. Silence is a whole different language. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it doesn't explain. It simply exists, steady, unbothered, and rooted in truth. Where obsession spirals, silence grounds. Where obsession is reactive, silence is intentional. And in a world where everyone's shouting to be heard, choosing to say nothing is often the loudest thing you can do. You see, when someone treats your love like it's disposable, they expect your reaction. They expect the argument, the breakdown, the drama. They expect to see that they still matter to you, even if it's only through pain. Because for them, your obsession becomes a mirror for their ego. Your need for answers makes them feel powerful. Your inability to let go becomes proof that they're unforgettable. That's why reacting, even in anger, keeps the cycle alive. It gives them energy. It gives them relevance. It gives them exactly what they were fishing for. But when you go quiet, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop showing up to defend what you never broke, that silence becomes a truth too loud to ignore. Because silence says, I don't need closure from someone who caused the damage. Silence says, you don't get to control how I respond anymore. Silence says, I've made peace with your absence. And that kind of peace, it's terrifying to someone who once fed off your chaos. You didn't just ignore them, you outgrew them. That's why silence is clarity. It clears the fog of fantasy. It breaks the addiction to hope. It shifts the focus from them back to you. Suddenly, you're not wondering what they're doing, why they changed, or how to fix it. You're too busy finding yourself again. You're healing. You're rebuilding your voice in the quiet. You're realizing that not reacting doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you finally care enough about yourself to stop letting someone else determine your peace. Because let's be honest, how many nights did you stay up replaying everything, thinking if you just said the right thing, did the right thing, became the right thing, then maybe they'd love you better? That's the trap of obsession. It convinces you that if you keep spinning the wheel, eventually you'll win. But you never do. All you end up with is exhaustion and an empty version of yourself. But silence, that's where your power came back. Because silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something is happening within you. It means you're taking back your energy. It means you're no longer emotionally available to someone who kept showing you they weren't emotionally capable. And that's the shift. That's when the healing really begins. Not when they say sorry, not when they finally understand, but when you stop needing either of those things to move on. You're no longer interested in noise. You're no longer addicted to chaos. You're not asking for clarity from someone who only spoke in confusion. Instead, you chose stillness, you chose to breathe, to think, to rest, to rebuild in peace. And that's why your silence is the most powerful response you could have ever given. Not just to them, but to yourself. There comes a time in every person's life when they look around and realize they're done performing, done proving, done showing up as a watered down version of themselves just to be chosen by someone who barely even sees them. That moment, that quiet, defining shift is when everything begins to change. You stopped auditioning for love. You stopped begging for crumbs. And instead of choosing chaos disguised as passion, you chose self-respect. That is growth. Raw, uncomfortable, powerful growth. For a long time, you thought if you just did enough, you would finally be enough. So you gave, you tolerated, you adapted. You made excuses for things that hurt and bent yourself into shapes that didn't fit just to keep someone close. You were auditioning, maybe not with words, but with your actions. With every ignored red flag, with every second chance handed out like candy, with every moment you stayed when you knew you deserved better. That's the heartbreaking part. Not that they didn't love you right, but that you kept hoping they eventually would. Because somewhere deep inside, you believed love had to be earned. You thought if you made yourself smaller, more convenient, more forgiving, then maybe, just maybe, they'd see your worth. But they didn't. Not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't capable. And that's what hurt the most. You gave everything, and in return, you got inconsistency, you got confusion, you got chaos. But one day you had enough. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just clear. A moment of clarity so pure, it cut through all the noise. You looked at your reflection and thought, I'm not going to beg someone to love me anymore. I'm not going to keep showing up for someone who never learned how to show up for me. And that moment, that's when the growth began. Growth isn't always pretty. Sometimes it feels like grief, because letting go of chaos means letting go of what you once believed was love. It means unlearning patterns, the ones that told you you had to earn affection, that love was a battle, that being chosen required suffering. And that unlearning, it's painful, but necessary. You stopped chasing mixed signals. You stopped over explaining your heart. You stopped justifying mistreatment in the name of potential. Instead, you did something bold, something that too many people are afraid to do. You chose you. You chose the quiet of self, respect over the noise of temporary attention. You chose nights of peace over nights of wondering if you were too much or not enough. You chose to be whole alone instead of half, loved together. And that is no small thing, because the moment you stopped auditioning, the moment you stopped shrinking yourself just to stay in someone's life, you reclaimed your power. You stopped handing out the best parts of yourself to people who only wanted pieces. You stopped showing up as a version of yourself that was palatable for their comfort. You became your own validation, not their approval, not their affection, not their attention. You no longer ask, what did I do wrong? Now you ask, oh, why was I trying so hard for someone who wasn't trying at all? You no longer cry over what they didn't give you. Now you celebrate what you finally gave yourself: boundaries, respect, and a clean break from emotional chaos. And maybe, just maybe, you finally realize something that changes everything. You are not hard to love. You were just trying to be loved by someone who didn't know how to. So you walked away. Not because you were bitter, but because you were better. Better than the bare minimum. Better than breadcrumb affection. Better than showing up like love is a stage and you're waiting for the applause that never comes. Now, you don't perform, you live. You don't chase love. You attract it by being whole, honest, and fully yourself. You don't beg. You believe that the right love won't make you audition for it.